Good morning. I'm Aditi Bandyopadhyay from Adelphi University on Long Island. I'll be moderating the presentation, Impacts of SUNY ScienceDirect Cancellation on STEM Faculty at UB. Before I introduce our speakers today, I would like to mention a few things. This session is being recorded. Please stay muted unless you are invited to speak. If you have any questions for our presenters, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. Our speakers will answer some questions as they come in during their presentation, and other questions will be answered at the end of their presentation. So now I'm going to introduce our two wonderful speakers. Amanda McCormick is a member of the Science and Engineering Library Services team at the University at Buffalo, where she serves as the chemistry and physics librarian. She holds an MLS and a JD from the University at Buffalo, as well as a BS degree in biology from Hobart and William Smith Colleges. Erin Rowley is the head of Science and Engineering Library Services at the University at Buffalo and serves as the engineering librarian. She holds an MLS from the University at Buffalo and a BA in communication from SUNY Geneseo. Now, I invite our speakers to begin their presentations, Impacts of SUNY ScienceDirect Cancellation on STEM Faculty at UB. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. As mentioned, our presentation today, Impacts of SUNY ScienceDirect Cancellation on STEM Faculty at UB. As mentioned, I'm Erin Rowley, head of Science and Engineering Library Services and the engineering librarian at UB. And I'll pass this along to my co-presenter, Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. We're very excited to talk about this topic, as you will see. So my name's Amanda. I am an early career librarian here at UB, and I work as liaison to chemistry and physics. We also wanted to acknowledge our team member, Kath O'Brien, who is not here with us today during the presentation, but she conducted a number of the interviews. She's been an integral part of this project as well. Kath is the Assistant Director of Assessment and Resource Planning at UB. Okay, so a brief agenda to give you an idea of what we're talking about today. We'll go through the project background, and then we'd like to give you a brief local context about UB itself. We'll talk about the research study and its methods, go into some UB specific findings, next steps, and then afterwards, we really want to leave time for questions and discussion. We're really curious to hear if any of you have had similar experiences or different experiences at your universities, especially within the SUNY system. Okay, so our project background. So after a 1.5 long negotiation, SUNY announced that it did not renew its big deal contract with Elsevier. So instead, the SUNY Libraries Consortium, the big group of SUNYs, contracted with Elsevier for a list of 248 core titles that would be provided to member libraries. The reported annual savings to SUNY was between $5 and $7 million, which represented about 50 to 70% of the cost of the original contract. So a tremendous amount of money. And here at UB, we are asked by Ithaka S+R, which is a nonprofit research group, to participate in an exploratory study, which would ask UB faculty to assess the impact of the cancellation on their research at UB. And to go into the local context, here is UB. We are a fairly large school. We have 12 schools and colleges, 20,000 undergrads, 10,000 grad and professional students, a whole laundry list of degrees, right? We have a medical school, law school, business school, lots of PhD programs. We're classified as a Carnegie R1 doctoral university, and our sponsored research projects exceed $200 million a year. So this is the money that we bring in from places like the NIH and other government agencies and disperse into the community and into our research labs. And so we were really big users of ScienceDirect. So the latest number I can share with you is our 2019 number, where we accessed 700,000 articles in that one database alone. So this was bound to have an impact on our researchers.
So next, we'll talk about research methods for the study that we were part of. The study itself, as Amanda was beginning to mention, was a multi-site study. It was interview-based, led by Ithaka S+R, which is a not-for-profit organization helping academic and cultural communities serve the public good and navigate economic, technological, and demographic change. I'm going to be dropping a link in the chat here for anyone that's interested in learning more about the project when it was announced. So feel free to check that out. UB was one of 11 participating institutions. 10 were from the United States, with one from the European Union, which was from Germany. All of the participating institutions had either recently canceled a big deal, quote unquote big deal, or were seriously considering a cancellation of that magnitude. All of the participating institutions were asked to obtain ethics or institutional review board, IRB, permission for the study, and then conduct semi-structured interviews with faculty members from their campus. Interviews were all conducted during the first half of the fall 2020 semester, including UB, of course. And UB chose to interview faculty members specifically from science and engineering departments, as many of the journal titles retained following the SUNY cancellation of ScienceDirect, the cancellation of the big deal package. Many of the titles that we retained, as I'm sure many of you know, were really more health science focused. So of the 9 faculty that were interviewed from UB, we had 3 from the Department of Civil, Structural, and Environmental Engineering. We had 4 from the Department of Chemistry and 2 from the Department of Geology. And we did include faculty from all levels, from assistant professor to full professor, as we initially hypothesized that this could really influence their answers if certain Elsevier journals were required or highly recommended for tenure purposes. Also important to note, all interviews were transcribed and then de-identified. De-identified transcripts were sent to Ithaka S+R following the conclusion of the interview part of the study for coding and analysis. And then the findings from this analysis will be discussed in a forthcoming report, actually due out next week. And it should be noted that we at UB have not yet coded and analyzed our own de-identified transcripts. We do anticipate doing that. We plan to do that to publish our findings in a peer-reviewed paper, but we merely reviewed all of the transcripts for today's presentation. Now to talk a little bit about findings from the interviews that we conducted, again, here at UB. First is communication. Communication was a major theme, primarily because we asked participants about how they heard about the possibility for cancellation 1, and then also the announcement of the cancellation once it had occurred. And so some background on how we in the libraries communicated information regarding the ScienceDirect negotiations. Town halls were used. We had multiple town halls held on multiple campuses that we have here at UB. These were not live streamed for security purposes, but they were recorded to share with faculty afterwards if they could not attend in person. Sadly, at UB, they were not very well attended. It was very difficult to get faculty to attend. Faculty and staff were notified about these town hall meetings via emails. These came from our Vice Provost of University Libraries office, as well as relying on subject librarians like Amanda and myself and our other colleagues at UB to connect with their faculty directly. In addition, schools and colleges were contacted directly by our Vice Provost of University Libraries for meetings one-on-one with deans, department chairs, to discuss the progress of the negotiations as they progressed. Now, news of the ScienceDirect cancellation was delivered at UB via a libraries news release on April 7th, 2020. And the news release was also shared directly with our UB faculty affairs. Liaisons were also once again asked to send this directly to their faculty as they saw fit. Now, anecdotally, as I see here, as I mentioned again, the town halls were not well attended. And I should state before I mentioned the feedback that we received from faculty directly from the interviews, we did anecdotally receive some complaints received directly to liaisons, as well as directly to our vice provost's office about the cancellation following the news release coming out. So, for example, in engineering, there were some faculty concerned that not so much that the cancellation had taken place, but that some titles were retained and that they were, again, primarily health science focused. But these were just a handful out of the hundreds, thousands of faculty that exist at UB. So, that's to be expected. Now, again, going back to the actual study of the 9 faculty members we interviewed, while the town halls were not well attended as we saw in person, faculty interviewed were absolutely aware that these forums took place and about the possibility of cancellation. Pretty much everyone indicated that they were aware about the possibility of the cancellation. In terms of, sorry about that. And faculty voiced that they understood the cancellation when it came to then the other part of communication, announcing the actual cancellation, that they understood the cancellation. In fact, there was one quote that said, "I went to 1 or 2 of the town hall meetings that were held when they were negotiating the contract, and I completely understand why the university made the decision that they did, and it's extremely expensive." Just so everyone is aware, we are dropping those quotes directly into the chat so you can see them, since sometimes it's a little bit easier to read those as opposed to listen to them. So again, most of the faculty were aware of the cancellation and absolutely stated that they understood why the cancellation happened, which was interesting to hear. And many of them even pointed out how well Delivery Plus, which is our interlibrary loan service, works, and that the cancellation ultimately had really little impact on them because of that. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Amanda to talk more about that in terms of other findings from our study.
Okay, thanks, Erin. So after, during our conversations with faculty, we kind of explored this issue of how they found items after the cancellation. Because if they were accessing 700,000 pieces of information prior to the cancellation, they must have had a need to get similar pieces of information after the cancellation. So like Erin mentioned, we did encourage our faculty and other researchers to use our Delivery Plus service, to request these items that they were hitting paywalls for. So I am just going to go into a series of findings that are a result of the questions that we asked the faculty about, like how would they go about finding the articles that they no longer could just directly click into instantaneously. So thankfully, our faculty were very complimentary about our Delivery Plus service. They were very happy with the speed in which items were delivered to them. Mostly, they said that they were receiving items within 24 hours, if not sooner. So we were really, really happy to hear that. There were a couple of grumblings and complaints. We do have a system whereby you have to click through a lot of different links in order to put in your request. So some faculty were grumbling about that. And then they did share that sometimes a time issue is important to them. So if they're working on a grant or a paper or something that is due within the next 24 hours, they don't have time to write an article. They'll find another article that cites similar research. And one of our faculty shared this quote with us, and I really like it. And I think it's really interesting. So the faculty member said, "Very rarely have I ever found chemistry that's solely in one place. Research is iterative and people do the same research or some other group is doing similar research." So the faculty member will hit a paywall and say, I guess I can't get it, and just go searching for another article, which I thought was interesting. It's not tied to the particular database. It's based on the content of the article. And they may also move on to another article for convenience reasons. Even if they're not under a time crunch, they just don't feel like waiting. So they go ahead and they keep doing their research. And then I have another quote to share with you. The faculty were very honest with us, and we have a number of quotes in here that summarize their feelings. And we're sharing so many because we just thought they were really interesting, and we appreciated how much they shared with us. So here's another quote which kind of touches on the cancellation and the use of Delivery Plus. So the faculty member said, "Truthfully, I'm a little torn about removing journals, but saving money is also something to consider. Also, like every academic on the planet, I think the whole model is just beyond absurd. I'm giving them my work, begging them to publish it, and then they are selling it. So I'm kind of all over the place in my opinions here, and I don't know what's best. And so rather than try to, come up with a solution, I just move on to a different paper." Another concern that faculty members shared with us was their concern over graduate students and their lack of patience. They were concerned that the graduate students just weren't using Delivery Plus, and that they thought it was too slow, which of course may be a bit of a generational thing. As one faculty member shared stories with us about how he used to walk over to the library, fill out the cards, go back to his office and wait a week to get the copy of the journal article that he had requested. But there is a concern there. They're concerned that the graduate students are going to miss relevant information, which I think is a legitimate concern. As for alternative websites, one of our questions was about Sci-Hub, and thankfully most of our professors have not used this site. They are very concerned about copyright issues and legitimacy of the website itself. However, I did have one share with me the issue of access to articles at places where they do not have the funds to use Delivery Plus or get other articles. So I had one who said he collaborated with someone overseas, and that particular institution did not have the sort of access that we have here. And they would use Sci-Hub, right? Because it was their only way to get a hold of the research quickly, as opposed to, say, writing their collaborator and waiting for them to send them the article. So that was an interesting viewpoint on Sci-Hub that I hadn't thought about before. Research Hub, they almost all use this site at UB. They have profiles set up. They'll throw articles up there. Of course, they're a little bit concerned about which version of the article they should have up there. But most of them use it pretty regularly, and they find it to be a good tool. And then finally, our professors will just email their colleagues. If they really need a copy of the article and they know someone, they'll just shoot off an email and get it. So there's quite a variety of ways that professors are getting the information and discovering it and accessing it. It was great to talk to them about that. Our next line of questioning was about preprints. Okay, so this was under a category that Ithaka categorized as alternative models for accessing research. Okay, so in the study, preprints were defined as versions of academic articles before they have gone through formal peer review. You might be familiar with some of these services. There's arXiv for physics, ChemArchive for chemistry, and bioRxiv for biology. They kind of falls along that pattern, which is nice. And we found, this was my favorite part, we found so many different viewpoints on preprints. And they were very, very honest with us about their usage and their feelings about them. So there's a big issue of trust with these preprint servers. I had one professor say to me, it's not real research unless it goes through peer review. They won't touch it. They don't go near the site. They don't think they're legitimate. They're done. in order to back up. So there's that viewpoint. Then we have someone who felt a bit more moderately. So they will go to the site, they'll take a look at it, and then if they're interested in the research, they'll email their colleague to ask the publishing status of the preprint. Or some have shared that they just review the science themselves, and they figure no scientist worth his salt or her salt is going to put an article up on the internet that is not legitimate science. Okay, so they feel that the fact that their reputation is on the line is enough of a reason to trust the materials that are being put up into these preprint servers. Among those who use the preprint servers, they have a number of different reasons for using it. One reason that they do use it is to protect their turf, right? Protect their research, because sometimes different labs are working on the same research and they're racing, right? They're racing to get it published first. So here's a quote I'd like to share from one of our professors. So when I have an article that's having trouble getting published and believe that the article is of the highest scholarly standard, then I will submit it to the Chem Archive so that it's available to the broader scientific community. I don't want to get scooped, right? So there's a little bit of a first to the finish line mentality with using these preprint servers. And along those same lines, other scientists are using the research that's being posted in these preprint servers to demonstrate that they are doing cutting edge research. So this is research that hasn't had a chance to get published yet in a traditional peer-reviewed journal. So we had some professors share that they're citing to these. They're citing to them in NIH grants. And I think one said that they did get a little pushback, but then they pushed back themselves and said, listen, the reason I'm citing this is because it's a new technique, right? And this is the only place I can find substantiation for this. And then teaching. So teaching was an area that they did not disagree on. They're not using them. They're not using them in teaching. And this is because they have a hard time with the notion that they are going to teach students on one hand that peer-reviewed research is the ultimate standard, but then also, by the way, go to the preprint servers and take a look at the new and exciting research that's out there. They don't think the students are quite ready for that yet. And so another quote to share, which I think sums it up really nicely. So he says, I typically don't use it in teaching. I think it's just because, maybe for two reasons. I think it's in part because my fields change more slowly. Like if you were working the areas of COVID, you better darn well be looking at the preprints because things are changing daily. In my field, the delay really doesn't matter. And the second reason I don't use them in teaching is that I'm willing to put up with the delay to emphasize the peer review process. So it seemed kind of like a weird message to send to students to say peer review is important, part of what we do, and here's a non-reviewed article, and I'd like you to look at it because it's fresh. So I have trouble with how to deal with that, so I don't really actually spend a lot of time with that literature in his. And I will turn it over to Erin.
So what are the next steps, right? We received a lot of great, invaluable feedback from faculty, with them giving up 30 to 60 minutes of their time and talking with us about this specific topic. So what does that mean for us? Well, we have a couple of at least initial takeaways. And a lot of this is just between Amanda and I having discussions. Certainly there's larger discussions that have to be had at the UB level and certainly at the SUNY level as well. But tying back to that first theme of communication, outreach to faculty, as I'm sure everyone on this call can relate to, is an ongoing issue. How do we tackle it? We know that email overload is a real thing. We emailed faculty about town halls. They came from multiple places at multiple times of the semester, of the year, and yet the town halls were still, sadly, not very well attended. And that can also come into play, of course, the timing of this one-time meeting. But we think that the email overload is a real thing. So how do we stand out? It can also be really difficult for liaison librarians to attend faculty, departmental meetings, to talk with them one-on-one. So I've seen this come up in other sessions so far at SUNYLA about like, how do we handle it? And I think we need to get creative. That's what Amanda and I have talked about. What does that mean? Well, we're really not sure yet, to be totally honest. We're still working through that. We have some ideas on our end, but this is a great time to have, a question to the audience. Feel free to put your answer in chat, but like, what types of outreach have you used at your institution, especially about the ScienceDirect cancellation? Did anyone have something that worked really well for you that perhaps others could benefit from? We would really love to hear it. That's what we're hoping this presentation spurs, is the communication between all of us, is the communication between SUNY librarians of how we can better ourselves and better reach out to faculty on this issue. So while this is not, notice that we didn't call this a recommendation section, because we don't necessarily have recommendations at this particular juncture. We're hoping they come, but we know that this is a next step and really a next area that we need ourselves, especially in the science and engineering group, but probably more widely than that, but that's our group. So we'll focus on that. What can we do to better connect with faculty so that they're aware and that they can voice their opinions, their feelings, what have you, and feel comfortable doing so. The interviews worked out great, but just getting 9 people to talk to us was a big endeavor. So how do we do that on something that's sustainable and that can grow? So again, feel free to put that in the chat. I'll drop the question in the chat here. So what types of outreach have you used at your own institution that have worked well? We honestly would love to know, and we can continue to discuss that at the end here. But then I'll pass it to Amanda here to talk about next step when it comes to analysis and collections in general.
Yeah, so we just had a couple of ideas for analysis that could happen as we move forward. We'd really like to know, what articles were requested, from which journals they were requested, and how much did it cost compared to the cost of the subscription. I mean, that's a general piece of information that I think would help inform future decisions. And then also more specifically, I think it might be important to departments if we focus on the important journals in their field. So we did receive some complaints from some of our smaller departments that they lost their most important journal. And the reason they lost it is because of usage, and they just don't have the same numbers as, say, something that SMBS uses. It's just different for someone in, we'll say geology, right? They just don't have the numbers. And yet the publication is very important to their field, and it's very important to their research and to their teaching. So I think we really need to kind of dive into that a little bit by department. And again, this will involve more coordination with the department, which backs us up again into the communication issue. And it's just really a matter of time, whether these professors have time to talk to us about these journals and how much, basically how much time we can get in front of them. And I think we're also just curious about how this will fit eventually into our bigger collection development policies at the libraries, and also now within SUNY. Like, how are we focusing our limited resources? Is it going to be a piecemeal thing? Are we going into more specialized databases? Clearly big deals are out of favor. Not that I'm upset, but it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch, right? We went through this whole phase of these huge packages, which one of my professors described as cable TV. And now we're going to like a Hulu model or something like that. But it's going to be fascinating to watch and kind of keep track of.
Absolutely. So just wrapping up here, the Ithaka S+R final report, as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, will be available tentatively June 22nd. We will share that with the SUNYLA listserv once it is available. I believe you can go to the link that I shared in the chat. I think you can sign up for additional notifications if you're interested in finding out more information about Ithaka S+R reports and other things in general, since they do many of these sort of semi-structured interview-based studies for a variety of different reasons. So stay tuned for that. Once we have it, we will absolutely share with the SUNYLA listserv. To get in touch with us, you can, of course, contact us on email. We're on Twitter as well. We'll drop our emails in the chat here too, so you have them. And then, yeah, so we would love to open this up right now to questions, discussion. I mean, maybe there, I know we had posed the question to the audience about what types of outreach have you used that have worked well. Maybe you are in the same situation. Does anybody have questions or want to share experiences on your end with the ScienceDirect cancellation? We would really love to hear. Like I said, I think a big takeaway from this, Amanda and I were hoping to get, is just to connect with all of you at SUNYLA and to open that door of communication so we can keep talking about it going forward. But thank you all very much for attending, and for any questions you have, we'd love to answer them.
Okay, I will be the icebreaker. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And I know I am suffering too, because I'm the science librarian at Adelphi University, and the budget crunch is affecting all of us. So I would like to know when the report will be out. Will it just cover your interviews, or there would be other interviews from other discipline specific, liaisons?
Great question. Yeah, no, the Ithaka report will cover their findings after coding and analyzing all of the de-identified transcripts from all 11 participating institutions.
Okay.
So we have full reign to publish our own report based off what we found at UB, which we plan to do. But the Ithaka report will be from all institutions, which will be really interesting, I think, to see, especially because it has institutions on both sides of the coin of like considering the cancellation and how their faculty feel about the possibility of cancellation, and then other institutions like UB where they have canceled it.
And my next question would be, why do you consider just to interview just the engineering faculty, not physics, chemistry, because you are liaison to those departments?
I was able to I talked to 4 chemistry professors.
Okay.
Yes.
So Amanda, like we wanted to leverage our liaison roles, especially Amanda mentioned she's a newer career librarian. I consider that to myself, at least on the academic side as well. I've only been at UB for about 3.5 years. So I took charge of contacting civil, structural, and environmental engineering faculty for participation. Amanda took on chemistry, and then our co-researcher, Kathleen O'Brien, took geology. And while she does not serve as the liaison to geology, she took on that area because it was identified that geology might be a good department to talk to about this. So, but for the other ones, we did use our liaison roles.
So you just used the engineering faculty interviews for this presentation. You did not include the chemistry and geology.
No. We included all of them.
Oh, so altogether there were 9.
Altogether, yep. Altogether.
Okay.
Yeah. We asked as many people as we could.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we got. And we're happy to get them, but it was a struggle to even get to that number, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it was. It was also a really tough time of year. We asked at the beginning of the fall 2020 semester, when we knew we were going to be doing an all virtual, pretty much all virtual semester, and so it was a really busy time, and that was some feedback that we had for Ithaka, that it was difficult for us to get participants in terms of interviewees because of the timing of it. I don't really know, given COVID, if there was going to be a good time to ask any faculty, although when is there a good time to ask any faculty regardless of COVID? But COVID didn't help, that's for sure. But we were thankful for the 9 that agreed to participate.
And I see that Ellen did ask a question. Hi, Ellen. Ellen from UB asked a question about numbers. We don't have any numbers, unfortunately. I wish we did. That's going to be a next step as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, so much data to go through. So.
Any other thoughts out there? We would love to hear from other librarians who have experienced cancellations and how they manage the process.
My university is a private university and is much smaller than your institution. But our science faculty, no matter how small their departments are, they are very sensitive to cancellation, and they're not very considerate like your faculty. Okay, we'll manage somehow. No, they give me a very hard time when I talk about cancellation. But, they all understand that, now the situation is not, a good situation to ask for more journals. So they're trying to cooperate, but, they are not very happy about cancellation, whether they use it all the time or use it, once in a while. So yeah. They just, keep them as their assets. So cannot touch them.
And I thought they would be angrier. They seem to be very cognizant of the fact that these packages and the prices are out of control. And many of them did mention the California cancellation. So I think it helped our cause a little bit that such a big group of universities were first. And, some of our people were like, why didn't we just cancel it? Why didn't we do what California did? Mm-hmm. They wanted us to go the full 9 yards or whatever. I don't know the phrase, but they wanted us to go the full field. And not, I don't know. One just said we should be bullies. We should be more aggressive when it comes to this, because the financials are out of control, and they're angry at the publishers as well. Yeah. They're angry at the system.
Yeah, it really, absolutely. I would totally agree with that, Amanda. There was a lot, you shared one great quote about the process of publishing. That person was not the only one that mentioned the process and how crazy it is of spending your time to do this research, asking it to be published, volunteering then your own time to perhaps review other people's articles that they write, and then the libraries have to buy back access. Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure we answer the questions in the chat too. Susan, I noticed she asked, did you have a sense that the faculty you interviewed spoke about this topic with their colleagues? Does word of mouth help? Yeah, I would, at least I'll say from my own experience with the engineering faculty that I spoke with, they did mention, all of them seemed to mention a departmental meeting where this was discussed. So it was discussed at their department level. Many of the faculty that I spoke with were part of like a sort of subgroup of that department, and they said that they talked about it even within their own subgroup. So I think that definitely helped get the word out. I will note though that of the 9, 2 were not aware that we had actually canceled the deal. And again, this was in fall, COVID had happened, but they were aware of the possibility, but I don't think that they were aware of the full cancellation. Yeah. And Amanda, do you have anything else to share on that in terms of the word of mouth?
No, I don't.
Okay. Right. And then there's more things coming in. What else do we have here? Oh, Ellen asked, were the faculty you spoke with more focused on their specific need, or did they discuss broader issues? The one quote seemed to indicate a bit of the latter. Amanda, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, I was really surprised by their focus on the broader issues. I think they're at the point where they're frustrated, they're tired, and they're under their own financial constraints. So I think they understand the financial constraints that the library is under as well. So there were a few complaints, like I said, probably from the departments that kind of lost out in the negotiations, because the negotiations were based on usage, right? So in the smaller departments, they were more upset about their specific need, but in the bigger fields, they were more upset about the broader principles that were involved. And I think that's something to keep in mind. I think that they're allies in this, because they know how much everything costs. right? They're paying for their own stuff. They have APC charges and they have their lab budgets, and they get it, right? They get it. They know that our money can only go so far.
Yeah. There were several that mentioned that, that they didn't really know how much all this cost, that they were like, well, I get that money's an issue. I don't really understand. Somebody said like, it's above my pay grade, in terms of knowing all of this, all of these bits and pieces. But yeah, I think that they were both focused on their own immediate needs for their own, especially their own even research areas. Because I think even with a larger department, some of the faculty, at least in engineering at UB, have very niche areas that they're researching. And so might be only one or two journals that they typically need to publish in. Occasionally they go broader, but there's a couple that they come back to over and over again. But they definitely seem to mention like the broader issue of just the whole publishing game in overall, which was really interesting to hear. It was really great to have these conversations. We parse it out, but they don't see it the way we see it. They see it as publishing as opposed to our different categories. Right.
Yeah. That was interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Mark
asked, I'd love your perspectives on the new arrange the UCs have with Elsevier. Yeah. I'll be honest, I'm aware of it. I don't know how I have a lot of feelings, especially I think after this endeavor of the study and just hearing more specifically how the faculty view all this. I think it changed even my own perspective of this. I'm just, again, the bigger picture of it all. I would like to spend more time learning about, learning more of the, diving deeper, I think, into the new arrangement. Amanda, I don't know if you have different thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not in tune to it just yet. I'm certain whatever UC does, though, will be seen as a groundbreaker for the rest of us. So, I do need to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's going to be really our next step in terms of like taking this information that we got from UB and then hopefully publishing on it. So I'm sure that will be absolutely discussed in our, hopefully forthcoming publication. So, and then Shannon Pritting, here's a report that was shared with the SUNY Shared Collections Committee on the ScienceDirect New Deal from last year. We're doing the same data analysis now in preparation for title swapping coming up in the fall. Great, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, that's awesome.
That's really wonderful. Whoops, sorry, clicked it. So, great. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. That's good. Sometimes you don't know what you're sharing anymore. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And Susan said, I think it would be good to repeat the interviews later this year when more of the current research published by Elsevier is not accessible. In fall 2020, it was still new, and now we might be able to learn more about what they don't have access to and what they really need. I totally agree, Susan. That was actually part of our questioning too. Our presentation today is barely scratching the surface, I think, in terms of what we learned. So there's so many more questions that we asked in all of these interviews. And one of them was about like, when did they think it would be too old? If we were retaining things before January 1st, 2020, we retain access to most, if not, most, if not all of the information they specifically need, in terms of past issues. But when does it turn over? And it was interesting to see, I don't know, Amanda, how you feel about that question of conducting your own interviews, but like most, I seem to get like the average answer of like about 5 years, but most of them didn't really know. They're like, it's hard to say without knowing. And again, some of the people I was speaking with had very niche areas that they're like, well, it could be longer than 5 years because of like, there's not a huge amount of new stuff that's coming out, but it just depends. So did you hear anything?
Yeah, the one that sticks out to me is like one of my chemistry professors was just like, good research is not going to go bad. Mm-hmm. Right. He didn't see that as a concern at all. He's like, as long as, I enjoy having the old research and the new stuff. This is one that would go everywhere for research, including Twitter. He wasn't concerned. There wasn't a huge concern. I think this was, I got the interviews confused in my head, but they'll go to other places. If they see research that's new and they want it, they'll just figure out a way to get it, right? Whether it's through us or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
think, I know we're probably at time, but we have one last question. Did the faculty you spoke to publish in Elsevier journals? Did any say they would stop, presumably only if already tenured? Mine absolutely did publish in Elsevier journals, but this, I think one said that they reconsidered then perhaps, publishing going forward, or certainly taking on an editor role. They were asked to look at, and then, I think even if they're tenured, there's still a lot of, especially in engineering, there's a huge push to go to full professor and then distinguished professor. So I think that even once you're tenured, that doesn't really stop as much. I mean, yes, now you have tenure, but you still have the process to go through. Yeah, I think, I think that they're thinking about it, but some of them are told which journals that they have to publish in. And just because we don't have access now, I noticed a faculty member of mine actually tweeted yesterday about how he had used Delivery Plus to get an article that he published. And I checked, and sure enough, it was an Elsevier ScienceDirect journal. So, it is what it is. So yeah, but yeah, I want to be conscious of time. I know we're nearing the end of our time here. So, but
we have 13 more minutes. Yeah.
I guess we thought it was just 45 minutes. Oh, it's an hour. Okay. We have more.
That's great. Oh yeah, this is great conversation.
So you have full hour.
Okay.
Question. Are you planning to interview other users? Faculty is just one group of users, and they are the most privileged group of users because they have their networks. Some of them are editors, reviewers of the journals. They can get things easily. How about the doctoral students, postdoc, graduate student, undergraduate students? Have you ever thought to interview other groups of users, whether they are being affected by this cancellation or not?
Yeah, we interviewed faculty since that's what Ithaka S+R had directed us to do. That's how they wanted to proceed. But I was actually told by some of the faculty I interviewed, that they thought we should interview graduate level students. That came up even from their perspective, which I thought was fascinating, that they, thought about it too. I would love to do that personally. I know it starts to get tricky then, right? Because from the library perspective, like you could do a call for it, sure. But, perhaps the ones that are going to answer, are they going to be the ones that already have a good relationship with the library anyway? I know I have a great relationship with a handful of graduate students from all the various departments I serve, so they're pretty well attuned, I think, to Delivery Plus and all those things. But I would love to talk to more that don't use the library, that don't use Delivery Plus. So how do we reach them? How do we reach a good smattering of both sides, but I would love to talk to them. It's just the undertaking of it, because I'm sure Amanda can, say only 9 interviews, but man, it took a lot of time to get, and just so everybody's aware, I'm sure there's others that have participated in similar kind of research studies on their own, but man, it's one thing to say it. And then once you're in it, it takes a lot of time to recruit them. And then transcribe those interviews, even with automatic transcriptions from Zoom, it just takes a long time. It's a lot of effort, but I would love to do it. Amanda, did you hear anything similar from your
Yeah, no, I am with you, Erin. I would love to do it. I would just love to do a general panel of grad students and figure out how they research. I mean, I know the professors have this perception that they don't want to wait. And I mean, maybe that's true in some cases, but we have some there are some very, very serious graduate students and PhD students using our resources at the university. And I would imagine that some of them are okay waiting. They're very cognizant of reputation and of sourcing and things like that. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how they perceive what we do and what we're providing to them. I mean, is it just trickle down from their advisor? I don't know. Do they compare it to their previous libraries? Most of them come from a different institution. And that would be really cool to see.
Yeah. We just found our next project, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you, Aditi. Appreciate it.
Okay, my last question would be, what is the reaction from Elsevier about this mass cancellation from 11 institutions? Are they trying to negotiate with you, saying,
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know about the other 10 institutions, that's for sure. We haven't really been in touch with those other institutions that were participating. But from the UB side of things, Amanda and I were part of a ScienceDirect task force that was looking at a lot of things, in terms of, leading up to the now cancellation, when it was still a possibility. So we were part of that conversation, but we weren't part of the negotiations at all. That was just internal at UB. So I don't know, to be perfectly frank. I have not heard. So we still maintain, just for transparency, we still have other Elsevier products at UB that were not part of the ScienceDirect Big Deal package, that were separate, Engineering Village, Novel, those resources from the engineering side. So it's not like we took away all the money, but, so to be perfectly frank, but yeah, so I'm not sure. And I saw, Mark, you have another question. Has this changed?
Yeah, you have some questions.
Yeah, I know, this is great. I love it. Has this changed your perspectives on collection development strategies at UB? I hope you don't mind. I'm going to answer this first, Amanda, because I'm—
No, go ahead.
I'm sure it's changed both of ours. It absolutely has. I really think, and I might be in the minority of this. I don't know. But I don't mind sharing my own opinions, just because from the engineering side of things, we deal with a lot of gray literature. So things like standards. So patents, technical reports oftentimes are gray literature for engineering, but freely accessible for the most part. But something like standards, technical standards from organizations like ASTM, ISO, ASCE, all of those different kinds of documents, definitely not freely accessible. And so I personally, having worked in industry before coming back to academia, I personally understand the value of those. And I think it might be a better use of our dollars to focus on those types of specialized resources, not just engineering, other resources too, from the science or from the chemistry side, like SciFinder, specialized tools that are not loanable, that you often can't, from a standard side, you can't lend those out. It's very difficult to, based off the agreements that are in place. So that's my perspective. I realize that there's bias in that perspective, but it's definitely my perspective. But Amanda, what do you think?
Yeah, Erin and I have talked about this before, and we definitely kind of fall within the same general viewpoint. As I think that there are certain materials that we can provide to all the SUNYs together, and it'd be very cost effective and important to so many people that we should have it, right? Like a ScienceDirect package. But there's other materials that our professors are using as this R1 university that maybe UB should be focusing on, right? Something like SciFinder, which is an incredible database for chemistry. And it just seems like we have money, right? But we don't have tons of money. And of course, this is all my opinion. So where does the money go? I think our money should be going to support the specialized research of our professors and the university's goal of kind of moving forward within the research universe. Because, when it comes down to it, the articles are available, right? You can get them. You could, whether you're getting them, hopefully not illegally, right? Some people have to, but they're all over Twitter. They're all over Google Scholar. They're not even using us to find the articles anymore. So what they use us for is the specialized stuff. So should we be focusing on that? That's where I am right now with it. Obviously I'm low on the pay grade, right? So I don't have any control over money, but I mean, that's what I'm just observing.
Yeah, I agree. I know it's interesting, in terms of, UB also has the goal of becoming in the top 25 public academic, institutions in the US. So we have that goal to raise our ranking to that level. And so that's what comes to mind too when it comes to this, of like, can we in the libraries help support that goal? How can our collections help support that goal? And in my mind, like you said, Amanda, when we have access to these specialized resources, that can help our current faculty, of course, but also attract new faculty. It can attract grad students that we need, so like that's how I view it as well. And I might well be in the minority even, but like that's how I view it.
I'm with you.
So yeah. We got another question.
Yeah, we have 2 more questions and we have 4 minutes left.
Oh yes. Okay. So Ellen asked, do you have any sense that the SUNY-wide Alma Primo implementation affected the adjustment to the cancellation in any way, made it easier to navigate or not? I'll be honest, Ellen, I wish I would say only because they really weren't going to the library site to begin with. I'm sorry to say that, I know,
me too.
True, but most of them, faculty that I've spoken to about this, and also a separate interview-based study I did on my own with engineering faculty specifically, they've all made it pretty clear they go right to Google Scholar, like at least to my side.
Or Twitter.
Yeah, you notice that Twitter. I don't really see that on my side.
I see that. It must be a chemistry thing. I saw a lot of Twitter.
Yeah. So it's funny how it works out. But yeah, I saw Google Scholar a lot. I think I'm trying to point more and more users, like if they're Google Scholar, let's teach them Google Scholar, but how to use it effectively, how it can point them back to the library site with the find it at UB, view it at UB links, all those things, so I think it's just trying to get ahead of it, because sometimes breaking that habit, it would be harder than just trying to help them navigate it so that they aren't hitting the paywall, using browser plugins, things like that.
Sure.
And the last question, Shannon asked, did UB do any targeted or widespread unmediated article delivery for users? I'm not
sure
aware. I mean, we're not on the Delivery Plus side of things, so I'm not aware. I'm not really sure. I might also not be understanding the question correctly too, to be totally honest, but I'll say not that I'm aware of. I mean, even being on the ScienceDirect, course,
unfortunately, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think you missed the question from Ellen McGraw. Do you have any sense that SUNY-wide Alma Primo implementation affected the adjustment to the cancellation in any way? Made it easier to navigate or not?
Oh, we just
that's one. Yeah.
You did. Yeah.
And Susan, our colleague Susan from UB, thank you, Susan, for answering that.
Yes.
She mentioned that we tried to a few years back, but we didn't make it work.
Right. Oh yeah. Thank you for clarifying.
Thanks, Susan.
Too, on that side. I know that's great. Yeah. Thank you for providing that history too, Susan. That's good to know. But something, to continue, something that we looked into is that we did create a guide at UB that's about article access in terms of using things like browser plugins to access articles, especially connecting with UB-based subscriptions. Let's see, I'm trying to find it here in my browser here so I can share the link. Here we go. If anybody wants to check this out. Shameless plug there, sharing our guide, but that's been a interesting, tool to use. If they're going to use Google Scholar, can we have them use tools like these free plugins, but that direct them back to UB databases so that they don't hit the paywall, so they can get things. So faculty, students that I show this to are always like amazed, but it takes a little bit of time to explain it. So sometimes it's hard to explain like on the fly. You need a little bit of time to explain, like, this is what it is. These are the options, all these things. But there is a guide, if people want to, feel free to use this at your own institutions if it's helpful.
Because it'll bring them right back to the library and they'll use your resources, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they connect, like LibKey Nomad connects directly with our subscriptions. You can select UB as an institution. We pay for LibKey Nomad access. And I think that's great. I love LibKey Nomad. It's amazing. All the time. It's awesome. It's so great. Of course, and all these little pop-ups come up when I'm sharing my screen and doing presentations.
Nice.
And people are like, what are these about? But yeah, that's what it is. Oh, we're right at time.
Yeah, we are at the time. Thank you very much. Our speakers did a wonderful job, and I would like to thank our attendees. And now we should disband at this moment, and everybody should have a good day. Especially Amanda and Erin, they did a wonderful job. Thank you very much. And nice to meet you all.
It was nice to meet you as well.
Yes, nice to meet you. Thank you, everyone.
And you're going to send the slides to Jocelyn, right?
I will, yes. We do have a download of the slides, so we will be sharing those for sure.
Wonderful. And see you later someday, somewhere.
Yeah,
sounds
absolutely.
Great. Absolutely.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.